Today on the Crit House, the art of Lynn Saville and her 5 images from Ansel Adams, Brasi, Julius Schulman, Charles Schiller, and Bill Brandt. And Lynn Saville, it is lovely to have you on the Crit House. Thanks for joining us today.
You for inviting me, Geoff.
It'll be a fun conversation, I believe. It's been we've been talking for a while about some other things, and now I get to talk to you about photography and your 5 images. For all of you out there who do not know Lynn Saville, she is a fine art photographer. She specializes in images at the magical times of twilight and dawn, that boundary between night and day. She has published 4 monographs. She is represented by the Yancey Richardson Gallery in New York City, and she's also an instructor at the Santa Fe Photo Workshops. And Lynn, again, it's a pleasure to have you on the program. How do you talk about yourself? So I had your little thumbnail about who Lynn Saville is, but when people ask you what you are as a photographer and artist, what do you say?
I say I'm a fine art photographer, and I also do some commercial assignments, including portraits. And I also teach. I teach in New York, also at the International Center of Photography. I teach workshop. And I love living in New York City, where I'm constantly fascinated by what I see and experience on the street.
So you have had this assignment of having to try to choose 5 images, 5 works of art that have influenced you. How did you choose 5? Like what's the thread between the 5 images we're going to talk about today?
I realized that I could pick many sets of 5. And I realized that I could easily just pick 5 painters or, painters and sculptors, not because I prefer painting and sculpture to photography, but I have been influenced so much by paintings and sculptures, like the Sistine Chapel. I said to my husband, "Oh, I want to pick the Sistine Chapel," but it just seemed like a little cumbersome subject for a 5. And I thought, why not find, very important pictures that influenced me?
Well, let's take a look at what those images are. So you start with a man that many people think is the all-time greatest photographer, and one of his images. Tell us about this, Lynn, and why this is here for you.
Yes, I will. And if you don't mind, I might weave a little history, my own personal history, as I tell.
Please.
My family came to New York often on their way to other points like Vermont and to visit relatives. And we also went to Europe, and for my parents had sabbaticals 3 times. So I lived in Italy for 3 whole years as I grew up when I was 5 years old, 10 and 15. So coming to New York was a very big deal. And we took a ship. I mean, back in the day, people took ships from New York Harbor. Okay, so when we came to New York, we also went to museums and saw any kind of art that my parents took us to. And I saw this picture, Moonrise over Hernandez. Okay, but this gigantic print, and it was so stunning. And I thought, wow, this landscape, I just was really struck. And of course, the black and white, my father took black and white and color, but, it was black and white. It was like so moving, just the darkness of it. And then, okay, so that's when I initially encountered it. And then a long time later, when I realized I wanted to go to art school, of course, Ansel Adams was talked about in class, and they said that Ansel Adams had only had time to take 1 picture with his view camera of this scene when the sun went down behind the horizon, and so those crosses in the bottom were no longer lit. In other words, he stopped his car, sort of, you imagine somebody going down the highway and just halting rapidly to get out and take the picture, because he saw the beautiful white light on those crosses, which illuminated this otherwise kind of neutral landscape. So it was really interesting. So you can actually, and maybe many of you viewers have seen the unmanipulated print of this picture and then the one he, burned and dodged and everything else, all his magic that he's famous for in his darkroom. And then, of course, big part of what influenced me about this is that I thought it was so stunning that I was like thinking about night photography for my
Yes.
early development. I think this picture just like got my head set into this, well, hey, what about the night? And so every assignment we did in school and stuff like this, I would always include some that were night or twilight or dawn versions.
Your second image comes to us from Brasi, another night shot. Tell us about this, Lynn Saville.
Okay, well, I said that we went to Europe and lived there 3 times. This, even though I wasn't taking pictures, I was stunned by the beauty of the city of Paris, the Notre Dame. And my mom, who taught music, loved to go to like every single church. But anyway, so I visited these places, and it was part of what fed my absolute passion to move to a city when I got of age. I mean, had plenty of moments of indecision, but living in the city, New York or Paris or Boston, a city was like absolutely had to be done the minute I was free. North Carolina was a wonderful place to grow up, but I really had to get to the city. So I feel that this image, though I saw it later, it is an example of what I remember as a kid growing up.
Your third image from Julius Schulman. Now, I will note too, so you've got in the work that you do, there is both the night aspects, but you have a lot of sort of architectural influence as well. And I assume that's part of why you chose this one. Is that
Yes,
right?
yes. Also, when I moved to, well, first of all, my father was really interested in architecture. He was an economics professor, but he was very interested in architecture, and he designed our house that we lived in North Carolina. And also then, they saved up and got a piece of land in northern Vermont near Canada, and he built a house on that land too, which he designed. And it had this sort of Frank Lloyd Wright kind of look. And so I was aware of architecture, and of course, my growing passion for the city added to the interest in architecture because I love to walk. So when I saw this picture, I was really quite struck. And also I really liked this artist he passed away, but he lived in LA. And I don't know, this picture gives me that sense of LA, kind of makes me sort of chuckle, this sort of fashion-y feeling, these beautifully dressed women and this, just everything about it. And I love the way it's sort of just overlooking this whole city down below. And scale, it's like interesting. So I have found that his work to have been quite inspiring to me over the years.
It's a landscape, it's a lifestyle image, it's a little moment in time with the 2 women who are there, and it's ultimately architectural.
It's an homage to the architecture as well as the other things that you listed.
Charles Schiller at the River Rouge plant in Detroit, Michigan.
Well, I was happy that you didn't mind that I included a non-photo.
Love it. Love it.
This particular era, like between the 20s and 30s in painting, it really interests me. There was this sense of appreciation, almost reverence for industry. Even this painting, I believe, was done after the crash, and he still painted it with this kind of real homage to architecture. Some of his fellow painters at the time, like, I don't know how to pronounce it really, Charles Demuth, I guess it's Demuth. I love his work too. And he has a painting, I think is called My Egypt. It's like these industries were actually spoken of almost like a contemporary church, replacement for churches. I guess just out of the, honorable positions they were placed in the American city and life. And I like the way these industrial buildings look. I think the painting was really excellent. I just really like the painting. And when I've read about Charles Schiller, I have read that he did a lot of photography himself, and some of his
Yes.
paintings were based on his photographs, and maybe vice versa. And they say in the critical description of his work that how there's not a lot of detail in the paint on the side of the building. In other words, it was more about the shapes and not so much about every little tiny little detail.
Well, I was happy to see this, having grown up in Michigan, and sort of that we had manufacturing plants all over the place, and they stuck in my mind. And then it wasn't that long ago, I want to say 5 years ago, that I did a tour of the current River Rouge facility, and it's changed a lot. I mean, still fascinating in the way it looks, but it doesn't look quite like this anymore. Bill Brandt is your final image, and another one that edges the night.
Well, it's funny because later maybe I'll discuss the fact that I would, as many of us have done, started out doing a lot of black and white and then later moved to color. So I hardly ever shoot black and white, but I still have a great respect for it, and it was a huge part of my life. Okay, so it's kind of funny that out of all these 5 pictures, there's only like one color image, but
And that's the painting. Yeah.
but it doesn't, I mean, it's, these things are these black and white pictures still move me greatly. I found this picture just like amazing when I first saw it, and I've always loved it. And the reason I like it reasons are the dramatic landscape, the dour look on the painter. The subject is Francis Bacon, the painter. His look, it seems kind of negative or internal, and in a kind of a thoughtful way. And I thought that the textures of details on his face and the textures of the wall and the stones on the ground, and then the way Bill Brandt is famous for having fairly high contrast manipulation of his pictures, both in the shooting and printing, but all shooting and developing, but also he darkens areas very intensely. It's like his signature in a way. And so we have, the dark clothing, and then the almost silhouetted hillside. And then it looks like he darkened the clouds. It looks stormy, but he made it look, you could tell his hand in it, but so probably was pretty stormy. And then you see that street light, and that of course excites me because it sort of speaks of night. And I have to tell you how funny this is, because when my husband and I went to visit London a couple of years ago, I said, I'm going up to Hampstead. I'm going up to this hillside. And and I kept thinking, how did he take this picture? Like, I literally was walking down the path. Like I said to my husband and this woman that was with me, will you stand there? I was like trying to think how he could actually get it. And I realized how it really does look kind of like this in a certain way. And it also, but of course he did manipulate it a lot.
Yeah.
But it's my homage to him to just go and see what exactly he did. And it's like it's such an excellent portrait. So
now, did you find the spot, or you sort of, it was on Hampstead Heath? Is that where it was?
Primrose Hill, I think it's within Hampstead Heath. But yes, I found more or less, but of course the street light wouldn't be the same. And
right, everything's the voltage has changed.
It doesn't feel like you would, even if you went there the day after he did this, that it would look like that. You know what I mean? It's like he really, but it was just so well done. It's like perfect. And if any of you are familiar with the artist Francis Bacon's work, it really is not only true, the two things work well together, the subject and the landscape and the manipulation, of course, but then it fits Francis Bacon's work so well. So it's just like a plus image.
Well, that's one of the thing that I think is so great about it being about Francis Bacon. You know, it sort of relates to his work that light pole is just askew. It's tilted. It's not straight, like which you would expect for a portrait of him. Well, Lynn Saville, just a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for sharing your 5 images here on the Crit House. Yeah. And for all of you out there, thank you all also for watching the Crit House. Please join us next time.